Did you hear it say this meeting is now recording?
Recording in progress. Yeah, I heard
Recording
that
in
today.
progress. Cool. Yeah, I thought that they were supposed to do that all the time, but I don't know if they always do, but
I'm pretty sure they flip a coin or something.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So how are you? It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. I'm doing good, thanks.
That's good to hear, man. It's always good to catch up with you. It's always good to sit down. It's great just to chat. You're good for a laugh. You're good for a cry. You're good for it all. So I tried to make that a compliment. It didn't really sound like one,
I
but
mean, as an author, I think you want to make people cry sometimes. So I mean,
yeah,
I mean that's good. Yeah.
yeah. And
If
speaking
they're
of
happy tears, you know.
exactly, I'm really happy to be talking to you because I've been reading your book. Because
Mm,
why not?
ta-da!
There you go. So,
The paper.
when did this officially come out? Because it came out a while ago, and I'm extremely slow at reading,
Yes.
so it's taken me a
I'm
while.
pretty sure it came out in early December of last year, so December 2021, just before Christmas. It's
Yeah,
actually pretty interesting because the whole conception behind this was everything was shut down. I couldn't go to work at all, so I thought, why not sit down and focus on a personal project? I'll
yeah.
put all my time and energy into that. I decided I'm going to publish a book. I'm going to get it done before I'm 25, before my 25th birthday in November. So that was sort of my deadline, self-imposed deadline that I was putting for myself, is get it done before the 25th birthday. So I can say, like years from now, I could always say I was a published author before I was 25. Like those are bragging rights if ever I heard one. And
Yeah.
one thing I've definitely learned through that whole process of trying to get it ready before then is never give yourself a deadline when it comes to publishing. It's a nightmare, like trying to get everything sorted. There's always more editing to do, more steps you got to go through, and I'm pretty sure I missed a ton of things you're supposed to do because it's my first time publishing something. I knew going in I was going to mess a ton of stuff up. I wasn't going to get it all. Uh, but yeah, I did learn a lot about it, which I'm glad because that was the whole point, is just to learn and get used to the whole process. So now I can say I missed the deadline. I wasn't able to get it out before then, but now I can say I was an author when I was 25, which is still pretty good. I can live with that.
Exactly. And you know what? You can also say I was a published author before I was 26.
Not bad. Not as good, but it's not bad.
It's still very good. You should be really proud of yourself because
Thank you.
I'm 22, and if I publish a book by the time I'm 25, then that means I'm gonna have to start working on it the minute
Well,
I get off this
it's weird.
call.
I know you're 22, but it's like the beard just makes you seem so much more mature. That and the self confidence. It's both of them working together.
I think it's a little bit of confidence and a lot of just I look old.
Working through two school strikes and a pandemic. It ages you.
Exactly. Exactly, man. Yeah, I was listening to this is not the first time that I've interviewed you. I actually interviewed you about a year and almost a year and a half ago now. I think it was February of 2021.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, and it was for my podcast that I did with Greg Kondrak at the time. Amazing guy. We were doing a movie chat, it was called the Greg and Matt movie chat, and it was like a movie themed podcast. And on my YouTube channel, I was trying to do sketches. I was getting started doing sketches, and I had this idea to basically talk to writers I knew who wrote sketches and get them to give me their sketch so I could direct it and we could do a table read over Zoom, edit it, post it on YouTube, and then I would interview them kind of about it. And I thought it was a really solid idea, except for the fact that I know like two writers who write sketches. So you were one of them. And the other one, who that episode hasn't come out yet, I met like 6 months later. So I think I did all that I could, all that I could with it.
With
But I
what you
was
had,
always,
like
yeah, I was always a little disappointed that I didn't get to do more interviews with artists. So a year and a half later, I'm kind of shifting gears and trying to just talk to just artists instead of specifically sketch writers. So
like broadening the scope a little bit.
exactly, and I'm happy to do that because I was listening to our interview last night because I wanted to make sure I didn't ask the same things again. And I don't think it'll be much of an issue because I think a lot of the stuff that I talked to you about was sketch writing and acting in sketches and whatnot. And we'll still touch on that a little bit because I feel like that's a big theme and how we met and how we've become friends and work together. But the main thing I wanted to focus on is this book because I wouldn't say this if I didn't mean it, but I really, really love this book. And I think it's
Thank you.
fantastic.
That means very, very much.
Yeah. You should be really proud of yourself, whether you're, a published author at 25 or a published author at 75. Like it's fantastic, man. And you should be really proud. And I really hope that more people read it and more people check it out because I think it's fantastic. So the one thing I wanted to talk about, just kind of to recap the last interview, me and Greg especially are always like, I don't know how Patrick writes so much because he writes so much. You've written short stories, you've written screenplays, plays, sketches.
The crazy thing is I don't write nearly as much as I would like to. Like I'm
Yeah.
constantly disappointed in myself about how many ideas I have just like bulging out of my Google Docs, and I'm like, there's not enough time for all of it. Why do I have a day job? Why?
Yeah, I feel that way too because it's frustrating when you have ideas in your head and you're like, I'm curious, do you ever get this? You have an idea and you're like, that would be such a good idea, but I have to really, I really want to make sure I do a good job of it. So I need to sit down and do a good job making sure that I really focus when I write it. And then like about 5 years go by and then you're like, oh, finally found time to write it. And by that time you're like, I have nothing to really say about this. That ever happened to you?
Literally all the time. It's
Yeah.
the downfall of the perfectionism. You just want to get it so right, but you don't feel like your ability is there yet. You just keep putting it off. And you
Yeah,
look up and it's like 3 years later.
exactly. And
Crazy.
when I was listening to our interview last night, I remember you were saying that one of your favorite writers, I think it might have been Neil Gaiman or something like that, said the best piece of writing advice is just write. The worst thing you could do is procrastinate, which it's funny that you told me that in the interview about a year and a half ago. And I listened to the interview back and I'm like, damn it, I still do that. But
It's a flaw. It's a challenge like a lot of writers go into. And actually, interesting story concerning Neil Gaiman was actually that's how he ended up with one of his best books, The Graveyard Book. Not sure if you've heard of that one, but it's one where he had a lot of really good ideas for that, but he kept putting it off because he didn't feel like his ability was there yet to make it the way he envisioned it in his head, until finally one day he's just like, okay, I'm as good of a writer as I'm ever going to be. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write it out. And now it has a place of honor right on my shelf over there off screen.
oh, really?
Yeah. So yeah, like it just all comes back to just sit down, write it out, put in the time. I usually find one of the best things I can do for myself is just put in the time. Even if I sit down for an hour, spend the whole hour staring at a blank screen, I'll know I've done the work, I've made the attempt, and I'm still thinking about writing while I'm doing it. So it's still progress.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point because, like, I've heard some writers be like, well, like when you're thinking about writing, you're still writing. And in my head, I'm a little bit like, well, no, like you're not actually putting words on paper. But the more that I've like tried to sit down and write, like it is really surprisingly difficult to make words come out. So yeah, is that kind of how you feel? Like you sit down and you think about it and you're kind of going over some of those ideas in your head? Do you feel like that still counts as writing, or is that a
I
little
think
bit
it's
of a
the most you can do if you can't actually get them out onto the page. Like obviously it's
yeah?
going to be more rewarding if you actually have something at the end of the day to like really look back and reflect on, but that's not always possible. The muse doesn't always strike. Although just a while back, while I was taking this 6-day writing challenge thing, I found a really useful tool to help me just come out with something. It's called the world's deadliest writing app or something like that.
Oh,
And the
really?
way it works is you have to keep writing on the page because if you stop typing for like more than 5 seconds, everything you've written so far disappears.
Oh
Like
my
it really
god.
lights a fire under me to just keep putting word after word. and I found it really useful so far. I think it's a pretty good tool to have in the arsenal.
Yeah, yeah, because I've done a lot of like free writing and whatnot. I don't know if that's a thing that you do a lot of, or
I find I usually tend more towards writing with a plan, but I think it's good to free write. I think that's useful, and I wish I had the time to do it more.
yeah, I find it's good as like a therapeutic kind of tool, almost like just to kind of get all thoughts, emotions out, and then it's kind of cool to go back and look at it and being like, oh, what was I talking about here?
Like it's just a way to train yourself to actually write, because that's the thing. It doesn't matter if it's good as long as you keep typing. That trains your brain to keep going with it, and that forms better habits.
Exactly, exactly. And listening to the interview that we did a year and a bit ago, I remember you saying that because of the pandemic, I asked you something along the lines of like, how has your career and writing been affected by the pandemic? And I think you said something along the lines of you were kind of trying to use that time to sit down and get some projects done. And I think you even said, oh, I'm kind of working on this book. I'm just wondering, is that the same book that you've published now? Is that the
I think, yeah, that's the very same one. I was working
wow?
on it at that very time. I think I was in the middle of going back and forth with my editor, so that was right in the thick of it. It was a
Oh
lot of
wow.
just waiting for them to get back to me so I could go over their notes and verify everything. Actually, very interesting story about the cover art. I had a particular cover in mind that I wanted specifically, and then near the end of the process, where I was emailing the artist to put the description on the back, they looked at the synopsis, and they ended up coming up with this exact cover all by themselves, just as an alternative, and it blew me away. I absolutely loved it, and I thought, yeah, you know what? Forget the stuff I gave you. This is what we're going with.
I always thought it was like a really cool cover. It's weird.
I mean, it's
But
got a dragon on the front. If he didn't know me personally, I would think he's pulling me like a string.
yeah, it has a dragon on the front of it. It's either an awesome novel or a 80s heavy metal
Yeah.
record or something like
Which
that.
I think is what you want in a cover.
Exactly. Especially being a Neil Gaiman fan yourself, I'm sure that you're like put a dragon on the front of it. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Why not?
The other thing too is not only is this the one thing that's kind of blossomed after talking to you about a year ago, but in that very same interview that I keep calling back to, you were talking about writing a number of screenplays for a competition. And at the time, I had read one of them. I read one called Doctor, which was like this really cool thriller. It was like kind of eerie and had a really cool concept to it that talked about, morality. And it was almost like satirical, which I really love. The thing I love about your work is that it's always a mix of genres. It's never just, oh, a rom com. It's always like there's a rom com, but it's also, a disaster movie because it's the end of the world, or it's a thriller, but it's a knight and a police cop or a police chief from the
I remember that one,
yeah.
Lance and Bullet.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing that I love about your work is that it never just feels like it's stuck in one genre. And that's something that I've always really enjoyed. And I thought it was impressive that you wrote so many screenplays back to back that were, one was like a competition movie and one was a Christmas action movie and one was a
Yeah, I
thriller.
remember those were all for the Imagine Impact screenplay thing.
That
I'm
was it.
pretty sure that was a partnership thing between Ron Howard and Netflix. Although I could be wrong on that, but
I
yeah, it
think
was
you're right. I think
basically
that's what you said. Yeah.
yeah, it was basically they just give you the genre prompt and you submit the screenplay within a month of it going live. And me personally, I took that as a challenge to, okay, I'm going to take these prompts and come up with my own screenplays, like write new ones in that span of time to sort of challenge myself and
Yeah.
get some more stuff out there. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. The first one I came up with was The Here and Now. So that
Yeah.
was an action adventure movie for family, so like everyone could watch it. Number two was the lifestyle film with a competition element, which
Twinkle Toes.
yeah, Twinkle Toes. That's the one that actually ended up getting into the quarterfinals in the Screencraft Film Fund, where I submitted it
Oh,
to
wow.
later. So I'm very proud of that one.
Yeah.
Third one was Doctor, the one you listened to, which was a female-led thriller. So
Yeah.
similar to
Silence of the Lambs, something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
stuff like that. I really tried to capture a lot of isolationist feel with the female detective gets trapped in the underground prison thing, and of course there was the psychological feel to it of like, okay, you ever have that frustrating feeling with people who just have these beliefs and opinions that just don't make any sense, and you just wish you could cut into their brain, remove the bits you don't like, and just send them on their way.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to get into that sort of catharsis for people who were experiencing that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the fourth and final one was a action comedy, which I ended up making "Do Not Open Till Xmas."
And it's interesting listening back to that interview like a year later, because months after that interview, you actually had a couple of table reads for those screenplays, and I actually got to be in some of those ones. I actually got to be in Twinkle Toes as one of the band members. Hilariously, I
I'm
played
pretty
the
sure you were one of the funniest characters in there. It was like he was the comic relief.
yeah, and I think he was bald and he had tattoos or something like that, and
Skeet,
his
yeah.
Heat, yeah, that was his that was his name, which was hilarious. And then the other one, the do not open until Xmas. That one, I was like the police chief who was obsessed with being the costume Santa Claus, or
Captain Holland, I remember.
yeah, Captain Holland. And I remembered really enjoying being a part of those. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being a part. Yeah, the
Yeah.
tricky thing with those screen script readings, and I've actually been a part of many in the past as part of this online Facebook group that just sort of takes classic scripts and does readings for them, mostly for fun.
Yeah.
Those were the first times I'd ever done my own work, which I felt was sort of a step forward. I wanted to get more of my work out there, workshop it with some people, and see how it works.
Oh yeah.
And one of the hardest parts is just when people keep dropping out, because people have their own schedules. You got to
Exactly.
expect that kind of thing, but you have to scramble to find anybody to fill in for roles, especially when you've got a lot of extra characters in there. And actually, I remember in Do Not Open for Xmas, one of the people I had in for one of the roles had to dip out about halfway through because they had some kind of emergency on their end. So I had to step in and play their role halfway through. And there were two triplet brothers, like two members of the triplets who had a lot of scenes together. So I just had to grab a bunch of hats from off screen and just keep putting them on and off, trying to hope that maybe it gets across. Okay, I'm this character, and I'm this one talking to him over here, and it's just.
I will say I remember that, and you did pull it off pretty well, because
Thank you. I was hoping.
you committed to, one character has his collar like this, and another character is not wearing anything, like not wearing any plaid shirt, and then the other one's just wearing it regularly. And your improv background really came to shine with that one, because it was very clear. And
I'm pretty sure it looked ridiculous at the time, but I mean, that's kind of what you want in an action comedy anyway.
it is. And the other thing is too, with stuff happening over Zoom and table reads and whatnot, I mean, there just is something about it where it's not quite there, it's not quite 100%. It's kind of rough, it's kind of messy, but that's kind of the fun of it. How did doing those table reads help you become a better writer, do you think? Just by kind of seeing how your words are read out loud and stuff like that? Or
Yeah, most definitely. I think seeing how particular actors take the material and just sort of put their own spin on it really helps to see it in a different light. Even just preparing the script before putting it out there really lit a fire under me to look at it and say, okay, this part doesn't really work. Maybe I'll add this in. Actually, I remember in particular, there was a moment in the script where originally Captain Holland gets attacked by one of the main antagonists in the glassware section of the mall.
yes.
And he has a moment where the main protagonist, Rachel, comes over and sees that he's okay, that he's wearing a bulletproof vest under that. And I thought to myself, okay, that doesn't really make a lot of sense that she would see that and then go after him immediately. So I changed that to be she just sees him get shot and then she runs after him immediately, because that felt more true to life, that she would be blinded by rage in that moment, because this person, her captain that she's worked with for years, she just sees him get gunned down, the red blinders come down, and then she reacts to that. And that felt a lot more true to life to me.
Yeah. And I think that's a good thing too, and a benefit for you as well, because you're not only a writer, you're also an actor. I was thinking about this as I've been reading more and more of your work
Just to be
because you
clear, I have acted in the past. I don't technically consider myself an actor, but that's semantics.
I mean, that was what I was just kind of going to say is like, I've been reading a lot of your work, and it's funny because like my perception of you is like, I met you doing improv, and I met you in an improv kind of team and whatnot, or on an improv team. And I was like, oh, this guy's an actor. But the more that I've gotten to know you, I'm like, I don't really think acting is like your primary kind of goal. It seems more like writing is your primary goal, but acting is something that you kind of can also do in your bag of tricks. Would that be fair to say?
I think that's a fair way to say it for
Yeah.
sure. I definitely consider myself a writer first.
Yeah.
I don't consider myself much of an actor. I'm glad I have acted in the past because, on the one hand, it really helps me see things from the other perspective, so I get a better understanding of what is actable, what they're dealing with on the other end, which I think is invaluable for a writer.
Oh, yeah.
More personally, I think the experiences I've had in those acting environments helped me to meet the best people, Exhibit A, and just have that sense of community, particularly in university where I really needed a close knit community group to just sort of help balance me. Because if you only focus on assignments and schoolwork all the way through, you're only living half your university life, I feel.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah,
I
even
felt the same way. Yeah.
yeah, even taking it one step further, I think a lot of the best ideas I've had have come from my improv experience because a lot of the best ideas come from spontaneous inspiration. And you really get that when you're in the moment on stage and you get thrown an idea and you just have to run with it and you get something really amazing out of it. Bringing it back around, I think you might have noticed one of these stories in the book, When Shakespeare Was My Roommate,
Yeah.
actually started originally as a sketch from our big Shakespeare show back in the day.
Yeah, I remember that. And I remember reading that and being like, I saw the title of it. I saw Shakespeare Was My Roommate. And I was like, that can't be the same. Is it the same sketch pretty much? And then I was reading it and I was like, oh, I love this sketch. Like it was such a funny sketch. And it was so good to read it, and it's cool seeing it kind of in a different context because it's written out as a story rather than seeing it on stage as a sketch, but it works in both ways, and it maybe even works a little bit better as a story because it's a person from literature, a person who we know to be like one of the greatest storytellers of all time, who's in the story that's also written very beautifully by yourself, and just a ridiculous situation where do you kind of want to explain like the premise of the bit or
Yeah, okay, let's go through it.
yeah.
There's this guy who lives with Shakespeare as his roommate in a downtown Los Angeles apartment, and he has some troubles with a girl he's been seeing.
Yeah.
And Shakespeare offers him some advice on how to remedy the situation in the zone of, okay, what you have to do is you have to kill her father through a shade of curtains with a sword. She goes mad. Ghost comes back to life. You throw yourself onto some rocks. Disguise yourself as a man or something. And we just go through a bunch of Shakespeare cliches and puns and meta jokes. And it's a ton of fun. It was a ton of fun to do it on stage. I think that was one of my favorite shows was the Shakespeare show.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, it was. I think it works just as well on the page as it does on the stage, with different strengths and weaknesses.
Absolutely,
mediums. But it was just too good not to transcribe and write down as a story. I think I had to have that in there.
Oh yeah, it's a phenomenal story, and it's absolutely one of my favorites. Just getting into, just because we're still on kind of the improv and spontaneous kind of train and whatnot, and talking about having acted, I realized recently we're getting very close to the 4-year anniversary of my show Quick Fits, which I put on YouTube 4 years ago. It's not
really
great.
Been 4 years.
Yeah, right.
It was fun though. It was fun.
To
do.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk to you about it because we talked about it not too long ago. And the thing is, like, you watch it now and you're like, okay, it's kind of very poorly edited and it's kind of choppy, and I definitely could have plotted out a lot of this, all of the sketches much better, and maybe cut some of the ones that didn't work. I don't think I need to put every single one into the show, but everybody who I worked on with it, like you or Matt or Tremaine or Nick, like we all seem to really have a good time making it. I was just curious kind of what your experience with that was, because I know for me, I had a blast, basically bribing my friends to be in this like weird YouTube series with me. But I was very curious if you were like, this was fun, or if it was like, dude, what the hell are you doing?
All right, well, let me start off by saying that what you touched on back there with the whole Quick Bit series is one of the pure delights you can only indulge in when you're in that time in your life and you're in university, you're still figuring stuff out. You just meet up with your friends, you brainstorm a couple of ideas you want to do, and you just take a camera and you do them on campus with whatever you have, and you just put it up on YouTube. It's one of the, oh my God, it's a transcendent experience, and you can just look back on it years from now and be so proud. I mean, obviously, like you said, the editing, the production values, not that great, but you expect that from student productions,
Exactly.
And with stuff like that, you see so many people on YouTube with that same kind of value of production, but you like them anyway and you value them anyway because they have true grit and true passion. And you can tell that they're having so much fun with it.
Exactly. That was the thing that I really enjoyed about it, because it was a lot of fun. It was really fun just to be like there was one day it was like you, me, Matt, Nick, and Gloria, just all five of us. And we were just like, we're doing this, we're doing this, and we're doing this. And we just kept walking around the campus, and we're like, oh, this is a cool area. Let's just shoot this here. I have an idea for a scene. Let's shoot this here. And it was so much fun doing that. And as a writer myself, and I think it's kind of interesting talking to you, because you're a writer who has acted, while I'm someone who I would consider myself an actor first, but I'm trying to get more into writing. And I felt like that whole experience was really fun because I worked with you, who I look up to as a writer, very much so. And I worked with other people like Nick and Matt and Gloria, who are just also hilarious, super funny people, Tremaine as well. And it was a great experience because it really taught me a lot about writing. The one thing I was telling you about recently is the thing I love about Quick Bits, despite the, poor production value and editing and all of that, is that it was super spontaneous. Like you said, like it was just, we had an idea, we went with it, we didn't even think twice about it. Do you think that spontaneity in writing like is a really important thing? Because I personally do. I think being spontaneous and being like, this idea, I don't know if it's going to work, but I just want to go for it. Do you think that's a valuable tool for what you do, or is it something where you're like, I like to write with a plan and I like to...
All right, well, to give this a little more context, I think one of the things you really need to know about me, and I don't apply this just to writing, but to, if you'll forgive me for sounding a little pompous, everything in life and in the universe, is there's no such thing as just a strength. Every strength always comes with a weakness and vice versa. So there's never any one right way to do things. As an example, just think about in combat, when you're advancing on someone and you go to attack, you can't defend yourself at the same time. You have to sacrifice defense in order to provide offense, and vice versa.
Do you get a lot of fist fights, just out of curiosity?
I don't have to answer that. You're not my... Show me your badge right now. But yeah, in that same vein, I also believe that spontaneous creation and sudden inspiration has its benefits. It has its strength in being organic, being understood in the moment. And yeah, it definitely has its place in a toolbox. That being said, planning things out and understanding them meticulously also has its place. And there's also a time to be using that because you can flesh that out more. You can think it through a lot better and make sure all the themes and everything makes sense from beginning to end. Because sometimes there are jokes that you have in the moment when you're, kidding around with your friends and it happens and it's hilarious, that aren't necessarily funny afterwards or to anyone who's not in the room at the time. So yeah, it's really a pick and choose scenario. You gotta pick your weapons for the right battle. And once again, I don't have to elaborate on that because you're not my judge.
It's true. And yeah, no, I definitely have taken that as someone who's trying to do more writing and get better at writing, is that I like to have a combination of both of those things where there's spontaneity and there's, I have this idea, it's silly, it's weird, and it's random, and I'm just going to go with it. But then there's also the, sitting down and doing your due diligence of, I really want to plan this out, and I really want to work on this, and really want to make sure that this works and make sure that this is fun. And that's the thing, like with Quick Bits, I'm like, great that it was spontaneous, could have planned it out better, but if I had done both, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
one of the best things to do is to just take that spark of sudden spontaneous creation
Yeah,
and just sort of take that and then put it in a plan, like so you can outline it and make it a lot more intricate and detailed.
exactly.
To do just go for like the top shelf of examples, if we're just throwing caution to the wind.
Yeah,
uh, Tolkien started his entire work that defined his career with a single line of narration. In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit, and he didn't even know at the time, if I'm remembering correctly, what a hobbit was, or that was the question that the line started, and from that he ended up sparking a whole world from that.
wow.
So you never know what you can end up with.
Yeah, you really do. You really don't. And speaking of world building and great writers, I want to transition into talking about the big event that we're talking about, which is your book, Because Why Not. First question I have for you, I have to ask this because I know I'm going to get an amazing answer. Why did you call it Because Why Not?
Okay, now one of the great things I love about that title is it sort of has a built-in defense there. So if anyone asks me any questions about the book or the choices I made about that, they already sort of have an answer lined up from them.
Yeah,
Why did you choose to go from this character's perspective? Because why not?
yeah.
Why did you take this story in this direction or kill off this character? Because why not? Because maybe they deserve to die.
Yeah.
No,
Why
but
did you
really,
put all
the
of your
thing.
like Facebook posts throughout the book? Why did you do that?
Because why not?
There you go.
No, but really, what the title tries to get at is, in a lot of fiction, we do tend to take a lot on faith, just taking things at face value,
Mhm.
and there is a certain amount of suspension of disbelief required there to sort of immerse yourself in the story. And I think that's sort of what I wanted to encapsulate there. There are a lot of things that, well, because all writing of fiction is essentially controlled by the author and tailored and detailed down to death.
Mhm.
So, like in life, things are completely random. They can happen for almost no reason, with very little justification. That almost never happens in literature, although there is still a certain amount of randomness. So,
Mhm.
because why not? Things just happen in the story.
Yeah, I love the title. I think it's great. I think it's kind of, it has a little bit of like almost like I don't want to say comical kind of element to it, but it has kind of a levity, a
A bit of
lightheartedness to it.
satirical, maybe.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, but I didn't want to be wrong and use the word incorrectly in front of you.
Because I know the definition.
Yeah,
I've researched it
absolutely.
many times.
Yeah, I've taken a course on satire, and I'm like, still can't really explain. Like, I remember a guy at work once was like, I don't know what satire is. Like, I don't know how you would define it. And I was like I know it when I see it, but I don't
Mm.
know how to say what it is exactly, which, if I want to be a writer, I should probably fix that. But I also have a degree in English at university, so that clearly didn't work. But anyway,
I mean, you know how to read.
I
That's
know how to read and I can kind of write. So that is enough at the moment. But we definitely need more. But I always really liked the title because why not? Because it really made me think, well, because why not? Why don't I give this book a read? Why don't I, sit down and read like all of the stories tonight? because why not? And I
Those
love
are
the idea.
the best titles and the best stories that are thought provoking. You know, really get the reader thinking about things.
Exactly. And I love the fact that it's also an anthology, mainly because I am a very slow reader and I have the attention span of a snail. But it's great because I'm a big fan of reading like short story anthologies, like whether it's like Stephen King or Raymond Carver. I know you're a very big fan of Neil Gaiman, who's written on numerous short story collections.
I'm flabbergasted as to how you knew I was a Neil Gaiman fan because I've never mentioned it before in my entire life. I have never said his name once since I was born.
Exactly. I just kind of drew a name out of a hat and was like, I feel like you're a Neil Gaiman fan. But the one thing I wanted to talk about was, we were talking about this not too long ago. We shot a sketch together last week, which will either, at the time of this video being up, it'll either be coming out very soon or will already be up, which like I really enjoyed. But we were getting to talking about some writers and whatnot. You were recommending some Neil Gaiman stuff, but you also recommended, I actually have it with me here, is the book One More Thing by BJ Novak. And I got it. This is probably one of the biggest compliments I can give you. Is I was reading through BJ Novak's novel, and I was reading some of the stories, and I was like, is Patrick BJ Novak's ghostwriter? Like, some of the stories are really similar in style, but not in a way where I'm like, it feels like Patrick's ripping off BJ Novak. I think he's copying him. Like, it felt like your own story having similarities to another great writer. Just like when I read a little bit of Neil Gaiman's work, I was like, this reminds me of Patrick's work, but not in a copycat way. And like you were very clearly inspired by this amazing writer and have used that inspiration to create something amazing of your own. So
I'd be lying if I said that the influence wasn't definitely there.
Yeah.
Most especially because those books in particular, I feel were a great impact when I was writing those stories. Because
Yeah.
a lot of these are stories that I've written throughout the past few years, like at random intervals that I just decided to publish now. And I think I definitely learned a lot from BJ Novak in particular, just in the field of, he taught me a lot of the value of being able to say more with less. Because as I've told you before, there are a lot of stories in there that are not even just one page, but less than 3 sentences. And they just managed to say so much in so few words that it just struck me as very interesting. I thought maybe I should try something like that to see if it works.
Yeah.
And they ended up in the book. So I guess they did.
Yeah, there are some very short stories in your book. By the way, what do I call this? Do I call it a book? Do I call it a novel, anthology?
Call it a book. I think novels are more like one story all the way through.
Great.
To call this a book is a little more accurate because it's a collection of short stories. So
yes. Okay, great. So your book. There we go.
We're playing it safe with the PC language.
Yeah, we're playing it safe there. But some of your stories, I love so many of these, but some of them are very short and they're awesome. Some
stories take like 3 months to read. I would never do that to you. I value your time.
Yeah. I was would you be comfortable reading one of your stories?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Sure.
I'd love you to read Some Free Advice because I think it's absolutely just hilarious and just fantastic. And like you said with BJ Novak's work, like you say so much with so little, and I absolutely adore it. And I want anybody watching to get just a little bit of just a little taste of Patrick Campbell.
I'd be happy to. It's one of my favorites. I would love to give it a whirl.
Awesome.
Okay. Some Free Advice by Campbell. Okay, here's the deal. If you believe in yourself, stay positive no matter what. Keep a smile on your face and a dream in your heart. Then you can still fail at everything and die horribly, torn limb from limb by a mutagenic spider-shark hybrid. What's important to remember is, if you work hard enough, plan carefully, really put in the effort, and do everything right, that still won't be any defense against the acid venom commonly employed by the spider sharks while hunting their prey. However, If by some miracle of chance you are born into a wealthy and privileged family, given every possible advantage from an early age, and end up placed in a position of power and influence, then you will suffer more than anyone when the spider sharks attack and decimate our civilization. Your life of comfort and entitlement having dulled your instincts, weakened your limbs, and made you too much of a liability for any wandering group of survivors to accept you. Basically, the universe is random at best, without any true certainties, and as of now, filled with giant 8-legged death monsters. So if somebody offers you free food, easy money, or a warm place to sleep, I say take it and don't ask questions. That's the deal. The end.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you for that, because that's one that I've gone back to multiple times because I just think it's so funny. Just so funny.
Thank you.
And the thing I love about this book as well too is that, like, in my head, like I've said before, because I met you during improv and we've done a lot of sketch comedy and we've done a lot of, funny stuff together. So in my head, I'm always like, Patrick is super funny. He's one of the funniest people I know. But I've seen so much. The more that I read your work, the more that I see you're not just funny. You can be extremely funny, but there's a lot of heart and a lot of seriousness in your work. You can see that in Twinkle Toes, your screenplay that I was so happy to be, even just a small role in. And even in Do Not Open Until Xmas, there was some really nice heart in there as well. Same with Dr. Doctor. That one, not so much heart, more fear. But, definitely shows a lot more of your serious side, which I really enjoy. And this is no different. I was telling you about, I just want to go through some of my favorite stories in this book, but one of my absolute favorites was called Passing Notes in Class, which starts off super funny and is like this super frustrating situation. It reminded me a little bit of like the Monty Python Funniest Joke Ever, where
the killer joke where
the joke is so funny it like can be used in the military, but you don't know what the joke actually is, and that's the point, is that it's this kind of this holy grail of information that you just
unintended
have, but at the end it really turns the reader on his head, or on their head I should say, and it's actually very heartfelt and honestly a little bit of a gut punch. I think you called it a bit of a sneak attack, because
I think those are the best stories where you sort of lure them in with a different kind of atmosphere and then switch it out at the last minute.
Yeah,
it helps the serious message like digest easier,
yeah.
but it also helps to like sneak up on them as well. So there's a bit of a surprise as well.
Yeah, that was one that I really enjoyed, just because it's so funny, and then it's just like, oh wow, I really feel actually pretty moved by that. And I didn't expect this to kind of make me think about some different things. I thought this was just going to be funny, but I like that kind of thing. I like when it kind of makes me think a little bit more about it. You also have a knack for taking stories, like starting them off really normal and then moving them into a really dark direction, which I absolutely love. Some of those are my favorites. Like,
I think probably one of the best examples of that is The Real Treasure, where it starts off exactly like a storybook for kids under 5 years old, and then just absolutely veers off the side into complete grimdark territory.
Oh yeah, that one was pretty messed up. The other one was like Fafnir Before, which is one where it starts off talking about a guy who loves to collect rare books, and I could relate a little too well to him because I collect books, but I also collect DVDs and Blu-rays, as you've probably heard and probably seen over the years. And
now that you mention it,
yeah. And I'm reading it like, oh yeah, I can connect to this guy, and then it really takes a sharp left turn into the danger zone, and you're like, oh okay, that's a little unnerving and a little crazy, but yeah.
Well, it was an easy allegory to set up with the myth of Fafnir, from Norse mythology.
Yeah,
the idea of turning into a dragon as a metaphor for greed and its corruption. it can basically be applied to any kind of obsessiveness. In
Yeah.
this case, it's an obsessiveness over books and literature and collecting. But yeah,
Mhm.
it could just as easily be applied to DVDs or indeed money, just in general.
Exactly, exactly, and that's the thing that I really loved about it. There's also, Elves in the Walls. That one I think is also hilarious. One that I absolutely love is The Answer Is D. That one I really got, a BJ Novak kind of inspiration from. There are also some other ones that really are quite different and aren't necessarily funny, like Screaming Underwater, which actually kind of made me a little bit like, holy shit, Patrick, why are you trying to make me shit myself? Like
Yeah,
this.
that one was more of the yeah. I was
Yeah.
experimenting there a little with free verse poetry, I think, but less
Yeah.
poetry and more just sort of trying to write down and capture a feeling and an essence.
Oh yeah.
I was definitely taking a lot of liberties there with the narrative, but I think
Yeah.
doing that, I captured more of an emotion.
I'm looking at all these stories, and if I was to name one of my favorites, like it'd be too difficult because I love Some Free Advice and Elves in the Wall, and what was the other one I was looking at? 12 Short Stories About Soulmates. There are so many good ones, but honestly, I think the one that made me really feel the most is A Ray of Sunshine,
Mm.
which made me feel so happy at the beginning of it, and then just slowly but surely just destroyed my heart and just totally crushed me. I the one question I had for you is, when you write these stories, what's kind of your goal in mind? Are you writing these stories just because they're funny, they're enjoyable, they're fun to read? Obviously you're somebody who loves to write, or are you trying to give a message or give the reader something to think about? Are you trying to make them think, or is it a mix of both? You're
Well, it's a big question, and
Yeah.
the tricky thing is there are probably a dozen of different answers that can be valid at the same time.
Yeah.
I think for me, writing things down definitely is a way of processing a lot of feelings and thoughts that I have rumbling up there
Yeah.
and putting them in a form that I can really process. But then on the other end, I think if someone else can see that in a story and they identify with the same thing that's in there and that helps them process their emotions a little bit, why not put that out into the world? Why not make the world a bit of a better place in that way? Like
Yeah.
bringing it back around to yeah, passing notes in class. I think a lot of people who suffer from anxiety or depression, which is something I've dealt a lot with in my personal life, both with me and my family at large, I think they can relate to a lot of what's going on in there, in that sense of um, okay, everybody else in the world seems to be happy, seems to have these things figured out in their
Mhm.
life, but I don't. So it's that
Yeah.
feeling of, do they know something that I don't? What is the secret that everyone else is in on that I don't have? Did I miss some sort of seminar that everyone was supposed to, entitled How to Be an Actual Person?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that and feel with that. And yeah, if they find that in the story for themselves and connect with it, all the better.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's definitely something I've, grown to really appreciate with making my own stuff, but also seeing other people's stuff, is that sometimes you just make something because you're like, this is funny. I think this is like a really funny thing to do.
Which
And
is a good enough reason. If it's
yeah,
funny and it makes you laugh, it'll probably might
exactly.
make other people laugh.
Exactly. But then there's also the side of, I'm feeling a certain way and I want to make something that reflects that. And I find most of the time, if you relate something to yourself, then it actually relates to a lot more people than you think. Because, I think it was Seth Rogen or somebody who was saying, like, when he was writing Superbad with his friend Evan Goldberg, he's like, I don't know if people are really going to like this movie because it's really just about like things that we like and things that we talk about in high school in Vancouver, British Columbia, when we're teenagers, but that's a movie that people go back to constantly because they love it and it's real to them. So that's something that I really love about this book, is that there's just so many stories where I'm like, you get it, you get something that I can't really express in my own words. And I think that's why it's just such a valuable book and just such a joy to read. Because honestly, like, for half a second I was like, I really want to be done this book before the interview. And like for half a second I was like, should I skim through any of the stories? And I'm like, I would hate to do that because I want to read every word. I want to process every word and process every emotion that you've put in there, because I enjoy it so much. And you should really be proud of this, man. Like, you should
Thank
really
you.
be.
I definitely am. Like, it was a lot of work, like months going into it just to
Oh
figure
yeah.
out where to start and the different steps to take. And
Yeah.
just finally being at the end of it and having the physical copy in my hands, it's still a feeling
Yes.
unlike anything.
Well, I got to tell you, man, I'm really, really pleased that one of my best friends is now a published author. It's a fantastic book. It's something that I absolutely love. And I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for being open and honest. It's hard being on camera as yourself. That's something that I've realized lately. Is I'm like, wow, it's actually really difficult to just be yourself on camera. Like, I love
Okay.
playing characters and all that, but
So I'm thinking, okay, I'm trying to be myself. What does myself do?
exactly,
Shoot.
right?
Can't
It feels
can't do
almost
it.
like a performance of yourself. I wanted to wrap this up because your friendship means a lot to me. When I first started out at university, I was very scared and nervous because I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make any friends. And like, there's a lot of people at a university, so you're bound to make some friends, but my Virgo neurotic as shit brain was like, holy crap, I don't know if I'm gonna make any friends.
Classic Virgo.
Classic Virgo, classic Matt, really. But I was able to get onto the improv team. And even then, I kind of felt like, I don't know if I really belong here. I don't even think I'm that great at improv. At the time, I didn't think I was anything special, but I do remember that you were kind of the first person who came up to me and, chatted with me and, asked for my name and tried to kind of get to know me a little bit. And I don't know if you knew how much that meant to me, but it really meant a lot to me because it was a difficult time. It was a big transition, high school to university. It's scary, and I really appreciate that, man. I really appreciate that you know, started the conversation because I was too afraid to. So I love you, man.
Thanks, man. I
Yeah.
honestly had no idea like that meant that much to
Yeah.
you. And it's amazing how just like simple acts like that can have such a
Exactly.
snowball effect.
It's crazy. Just saying hi literally is like you could make somebody's day,
And honestly, the privilege was all mine because just like
Uh,
having you as a friend and someone I can keep coming back to and relying on has meant so much to me. Actually, I was in pretty much the same boat as you were at the beginning of that. I remember coming to university was sort of like everything I'd worked on in high school was just vanished, and I was starting over from scratch, and that was terrifying.
oh
Like, I
yeah.
remember, actually, if we're going to be getting into it, I had one person from my high school who was coming to the same university as me,
Yeah.
and I somehow got into my head of, okay, if I can just hold on to this person, if I can keep being friends with them, that everything will be fine. It'll somehow work itself out.
Hmm.
We were in the same college, the same residence our first year. We did not see each other at all,
Oh
which is what happens,
yeah,
first
yeah,
year
yeah.
of university. You have different classes, different friend groups, you end up going in different directions. It's really nobody's fault.
Yeah.
But honestly, if I hadn't separated with them as I did and gone through so many transitions, I wouldn't have found that amazing group of people at Vanier. I wouldn't have found you or
Yeah.
just to name a few, Ethan and Haley.
Oh yeah.
Uh, you know, thousands of fantastic people down there. Yeah, and I could have missed out on a really great part of my life, which ended up meaning so much to me.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear it. It was, meaningful to you as well. And it's a scary transition, man, going from one school to the next. And honestly, because that transition from high school to university was so successful, it has really helped me with some of the transition from university to, grown up, which is like, holy shit, that's so scary. But it definitely made that transition a lot easier because I'm like, remember last time I did this and the world didn't explode? Like, you're probably going to be okay this time. It might be a little rough at some points, but you'll find your way. And as long as you're making art and as long as you're writing stories, I at least have someone to, make me laugh and make me cry. And make me see that, hey man, everything's all right at the end of the day, because life is life. And I was really trying to make Because Why Not fit in there, but it just didn't flow properly. But
don't try to force it. Like working in the title, it's if it's not organic, don't go for it.
Exactly. It's so tempting. It's so tempting. But well, thank you so much for being here.
Happy to be here.
To all of my viewers, check out Because Why Not. I'm going to throw a link for the Amazon in the description. If you read it, give it a review. Once I'm finished reading this, I am giving it a review. I am very much in love with this book. Patrick,
Much appreciated. Thank you so much.
No worries. Is there anything that you would like to promote?
Well, I've got a lot of stuff coming up that I'm working on. I mean, who knows how long that's going to take, since I'm working a day job and life always finds a way.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I've got, I'm working on an author website right now where I can showcase my stuff, not just, the one book I've published, but also the screenplays I've got as a way of getting those out there. And even right now, I'm working on a new collection of short stories that'll act as a follow-up to this. So yeah, just keep an eye out, and hopefully I'll get to that before the next ice age.
Amazing. Before you're 27.
An author before I was 27. It's got a nice ring to it.
Yeah, it's not bad, right? Well, thank you everyone so much for watching. Check out the link in the description below for more Patrick content. I'll even throw in Cinestrations Media and It's Trick down there in case you want to check out some of his awesome sketches that he's done on YouTube. And if any new updates with Patrick come up, I will be editing and throwing them in the description down below. So definitely check it out. I think I'm just going to keep the ending.
I think you nailed it.